Okay, so the project I'm presenting today is entitled Degrees of Value, Cultivating Privilege at an Elite University. And this is based on work I've done here at the LSE. The project is looking at how students themselves understand the value of a university degree. Made perhaps in the context of tuition fees, a lot of discussion around the value of a university degree has been related to the return on investment. So going to university brings higher wages in the future. This is not the focus of my presentation today, but I will give some insight from work by Britton et al., who show that there is a large payoff to attending prestigious universities. So returns on investment vary with subject and also with the institution you go to. Okay. I will instead talk about two other perspectives. So one is looking at higher education in relation to social mobility and access to professional jobs. And the other is looking at educational gains, so skills and knowledge that you acquire at university. Okay, so when it comes to higher education and social mobility, Philip Brown wrote that a lot of young people go to university expecting that this will be a story about social mobility, and instead they find that this is a story about social congestion. Meaning that with the massification of higher education, a lot of people are going into universities and they are competing for graduate professional jobs, meaning the cost for success is higher and the competition is fierce. Bucodi and Goldthorpe find that recent graduates face unfavorable social mobility prospects. And Brooks and Everett find that there is widespread pessimism among young graduates regarding whether the degree will provide a pathway to professional employment. However, they do interview students who attend a wide range of universities, so that might not be true for people attending prestigious universities. But even in that context, Wakeling and Savage observe that attending elite education favors, but does not anymore guarantee an elite future. Okay, so Brooks et al. Find that those students are expected to think of the value of higher education in terms of return on investment. They find intellectual growth and personal growth as valuable and desirable while they're at university. So this goes against this narrative that young people are just instrumental about their study. And the educational gains framework has become more commonly known in relation to the teaching excellence framework for assessing the quality of undergraduate degrees. And it's encouraging higher education institutions to both articulate and measure the skills and knowledge that they hope that their students are going to gain. So this is the educational gains framework for the LSE. I won't go into detail, but it's 4 pillars. So the thinking self, the learning self, the principled self, and the connected self. And this has helped me design the survey items. I'll get there in a second. Okay. So how do students make the most out of their university degrees? There is a gap in the literature around the strategies that young people use while at university to gain positional advantage. So a lot of work has been written looking at how children and their families build and use advantages to get into prestigious schools and to get into prestigious universities, but not looking at how they use the time at university to become more competitive for the labor market. Brown identifies two ideal types of students, the players and the purists. So we could imagine that the players are focused on the outcome. They want to be successful in the labor market, and they would be very flexible in what skills they acquire so as to appeal to employers. And purists follow their own intrinsic interests, and then going into the labor market, they find jobs that align to their profiles. So is it that students can be categorized as either one or the other, or is it that we all care about what we learn and also what we can do with what we learn? So my two research questions are, how do students at LSE perceive the value of their university degree? And then how is the perceived value of their degree linked to their understandings of success and to the goals they prioritize while at university? And I'll use this theoretical framework developed by Tomlinson et al., looking at multiple forms of capitals that students use to manage their transition from higher education to the labor market. So they identify 5 forms of capital: human capital, which is about knowledge and skills acquired through education; social capital, which is about the sum of social relationships and networks that connect students to the labor market and to opportunity structures; cultural capital, which is culturally valued knowledge, dispositions, and behavior that might align with certain industries. Identity capital is about building a professional identity through relevant experiences. And psychological capital is the capacity to adapt to challenging circumstances, build resilience, and sustain career goals. So this approach builds on a framework that some of you might know, Bourdieu's multiple forms of capital, which is economic, social, and cultural capital, but it adds 3 other forms of capital. Okay, so now about my study. I am using a mixed methods approach. So I am using quantitative analysis to look at patterns and relationships between the perceived value of a degree, priorities, and characteristics that students have. And then qualitative analysis to understand how and why students prioritize certain goals while at university. This design is, for me, particularly promising because the same participants answer questions in the survey and in the interviews. So at a later stage, I'll also analyze how different instruments of data collection might elicit different responses. Okay, so the 148 students have answered the survey so far. Information was sent by departments via newsletters, and I focused on 4 departments: social policy, government, economics, and statistics. These departments were selected based on previous work done at LSE by the Eden Center, showing different profiles of students in regard to their career orientation. And I also selected 27, I did interviews with 27 students based on, and I selected them to have different profiles based on the data collected in the survey. The survey contained information about demographic and socioeconomic characteristics, reasons for choosing university and subject, perception of the role of higher education for social mobility, the evaluation of educational gains, their priorities at university, expectations after graduation, and understandings of success. These are characteristics of the survey sample. So more women than men completed the survey, and there's a high percentage of middle class and upper middle class students who completed the survey. This was a question about how they themselves would identify in terms of social class. Yes, and we also see that a high proportion of international students filled out the survey. Okay, so based on responses from the survey, I selected different profiles of participants for the interviews, looking at their main priority during university and the factors identified as influencing success. I interviewed 10 men and 17 women, 11 students in social policy, 8 students in government, 8 in economics and statistics. All right, so this is the mean score of how they, to what extent they think that they've developed each of these educational gains. So we see that the ones they feel they've developed the most are autonomous learning, disciplinary expertise, and critical thinking. And here at the bottom, we have teamwork and leadership. I won't talk a lot about this. This is just to give you a glimpse into this, but we can talk more in the Q&A if you want. Okay, so this was a question about to what extent they think each of these factors contribute to their success while at university. And we can see that they think hard work matters the most, both for themselves and for others. So I asked them for their own success and for how they perceive others' success. Talent, again, matters a lot for themselves and also for others. However, when it comes to structural factors, such as parents' wealth and parents' education, we can see there's a gap here, and they think that these two matter more for the success of other people than themselves. And I think this will help explain some of the insights from the interviews, because it leads to this perception that people here are more privileged than they themselves are. And that can lead to certain strategies. Okay, so this question is asking, how important is each of these factors for getting a good graduate job? Hard work is, again, seen as very important. Knowing the right people is seen as very important. But so is talent, specialist knowledge, going to a prestigious university, grades, and extracurricular activities. Less so parents' wealth. However, when prompted to pick one, so what's the most important, most of them either pick hard work or knowing the right people. Yet, while at university, academic performance still is the main priority for most people. So 52% of them say they've prioritized academic performance, 30% say they've prioritized career preparation. Okay, is this linked to students' characteristics? Gender doesn't seem to matter so much. What is statistically significant is those who identify as middle class seem to be more likely to identify academic progress as a priority than those who identify as working class. And the same goes, so when it comes to choosing career development as a priority, they're less likely. Okay, so you would think that based on what factors that they think are the most important for getting a good graduate job, they would adapt their strategies while at university to reflect that. So you would think, for example, that if someone really thinks that knowing the right people is important, they will spend time here getting to know the right people. So either socializing or building networks getting involved in extracurricular activities. Yeah.
So sorry, what is the scale of the numbers?
It's okay, I'll explain. So this is on a scale of 0 to 10, but it's looking, so the outcome variable is the score they've assigned to how important is knowing the right people. Yes. And this is here, it's how much they prioritize each of these. So academic progress is low priority, moderate, high priority, top priority. But it does not seem to have a statistically significant relationship. Okay, so to summarize some insights from the quantitative analysis so far, academic success remains the dominant priority. Gender differences are negligible, so though men are slightly more likely to prioritize career preparation, men and women have similar priorities while at university. Subjective social class has limited effect. Just I found that compared to working class students, young people from middle class background are more focused on academic performance as a priority. And interestingly, beliefs about factors leading to a good graduate job do not seem to influence students' priorities during university. So now, with insights from the qualitative analysis, I'll provide an explanation, a potential explanation as to why that might be the case. Okay, so are students at LSE pessimistic about the value of their university degree? This question is measuring students' beliefs that their degree will help them secure a professional job. So we see that almost 75% either strongly agree or agree that their degree will help them secure a professional job. However, when asked in interviews about this, I'll read the conversation I had with Ayana. So she said, it's just like a prerequisite, and then everything else employability-wise is what you do outside of university. And I asked her, how does that impact you, the fact that this is just a prerequisite? And she said, I feel scammed. Before you go into university, you sort of think like, oh, I just need to get a degree and then I'll be handed a job. But it's not like that. You get to this next stage and it's not the end. There are still so many people at university. So what's the next signal? And Daniel says, would I have better opportunities than my parents had? I'm not entirely sure. My father also went to quite an impressive university. Because we have a similar background, I'll have slightly worse opportunities than him because it's more competitive now. But also, I can use my family as a resource. I can build on all these other things. So my interpretation from this is that they know that the university degree will not guarantee them a professional job, but they think they have a good opportunity and they have a good chance at converting this opportunity into a success after graduation. And how? That's the question, how? So Iris here explains how time at university is used to build positional advantage. So she says, right now, everyone goes to university. Everyone's trying to get the same jobs. I think the thing that has to differentiate people is the university they go to, their degree classification, the things that they did while they were at university. So she is glad that this is a competitive environment and she is pushed to do things while at university. And to understand the positional competition between them, so the last sentence says, so when it comes down to it, you're just another person's obstacle. So how do they make the most out of their time here? They use, so both Lee and Aidan use words such as multifaceted and then balancing, which means they have multiple goals that they're trying to to whole at the same time, or to multiple priorities that need to be balanced. Okay, and now I'll show how they contribute to building each of those forms of capital that I spoke about in the beginning. So it's common among participants to say that they have built their thinking self, and knowledge is understood now by Zane as problem-solving skills. And Alice talks about how she really developed critical thinking. Okay. The value of connections was seen as very important, so this was commonly mentioned by interviewees, both regarding connections with alumni and peers. And what I gathered from doing these interviews is that because of increased competition and perceiving peers as more privileged, young people now are more willing to use inherited connections. So Matthew here says that it's a bit of a funny story because in London I applied for about 200 different internships and got an interview but got rejected because they needed a certain numbers of months of experience. And I was able to get an internship in my home country because I had a connection through my dad. So this is seen as legitimate because they think everyone else does the same. Okay, so in terms of building cultural capital, several students talk about gaining transnational capital, which is an ability to feel confident working and interacting with people from different countries. And there's also this prestige associated with this university that they mentioned. Several of them mentioned this. Avi here says that the main gain is just clout. Even if your degree and worldview doesn't fit with the kind of finances, City of London persona, there is still an expectation you are part of an elite class and you are treated in this way. So in regard to identity capital, building a professional identity, many participants acknowledge that this is an environment that favors building identity capital early, from an early stage, so right when they step foot in this university. And some of them really appreciated that, while others felt that it's too much because building a professional identity too soon might mean that they don't have enough time to figure out what they would really want to do. Here are the two perspectives. Aidan says that he really likes this, that LSE was a career-focused university because he gets useful information. Whereas Daniel said that it's too much, like, can we just enjoy university a bit? Everyone rushes to the same path and I don't want the same path. So there's also this peer pressure of having to move towards a goal you haven't really defined yet. Okay, and they speak a lot about how it's very useful to navigate the job application process with peers and how they build resilience through that and through the support they get here. So they say that you have to be hardworking and persevere. If you're not open to rejection and you don't put in the effort, you won't be successful. Okay, so why are they building all these forms of capital? So there is work in the sociology of education that claims that prestigious educational institutions legitimize the transfer of privilege from one generation to another by making it seem meritocratic. So Edward explains how, at the end of the day, employers aren't going to take you just because you're really wealthy and they know your dad. That does go on, but it won't be in actually competitive jobs. It has to be a meritocratic system. So it's like rich people realize that, like they're not stupid. They know that you can't just ride off of inheriting forever. You need to actually become the smartest at the end of the day. So this is one perspective. Not everyone comes from privilege though. So Zain and Avi are both from a more disadvantaged background. But the difference between them is that Zain can really focus on doing all those things while he's at university. So on immersing himself in all those different activities, while Avi, who had a caretaking responsibilities, couldn't. So from Zain's perspective, the moment you step into LSE, you become part of the 1%. I don't think you have a right to complain. At that point, do you work hard? And his answer is absolutely yes. Well, Avi says, I know people who've had a much easier time and were able to focus on their degree more. I clock in, do what I've got to do, and then get out. I don't have the bandwidth to make the most out of the other thing. So there is this, in a way, regret that he can't really pursue all those opportunities. Okay, so to reflect on what I've presented so far, I found that priorities vary, but academic achievement is still the most valued. Hard work is commonly regarded as the most important factor for success. The belief in importance of knowing the right people does not seem to influence the way they spend their time here at university. And young people cultivate multiple forms of graduate capital so as to gain positional advantage. Okay, thank you very much.
We were right on time. It's 1:30, but you have 15 minutes, and I'm going to let you tell you what to do it.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Fiona. It's very interesting, like the results about self, like your own perception and the perception of others is like super. It's very true, I think. I have one question, which might be probably stupid, but I feel like there's an elephant in the room in this research, which is the macroeconomic context. You know how the UK, where the UK is going from an economic point of view, etc. And like, how did you manage to like take this information from the interviews that you realized, or from the survey that you carried out, and also, for example, political positions? I think that could also affect the way in which you perceive yourself, perceive others, etc., and perceive the value of your degree.
So I think many of them were very aware that they might not get a good job at the end of this process. So they know about the fact that it's more difficult for them than it was for previous generations, that's for sure. And I think that drives, in a way, the way they spend their time here. I find that it's very intentional, the way they spend time here, which is not the way I spent my time while I was in my undergraduate studies. So I do think it has an impact. Now, I also asked in interviews about tuition fees, so whether they see it as an investment or they see it as a necessary payment. Most of them don't really think about tuition fees.
Because it's their parents.
Yes, because they don't worry about it. So, yeah. It's a mixed answer. I think they do have an added pressure, but I think they don't really have an added pressure in the sense that they think they will live in poverty, or that's the fear. I think the pressure is whether they will help convert this into a good job.
Thank you.
Yes. Which one? Emma.
I just wonder if you plan to expand your sample to include other universities, because everyone here knows how particular LSE is.
Yes.
Especially even within the so-called group of elite universities, I think LSE is peculiar, especially in terms of career. Like, you think about Oxford, I don't think, and LSE has that reputation, which means there is huge selection already happening before these kids even got in. So the ones who really don't like this or don't need this wouldn't even have come here in the first place. So how do you characterize this specific case of LSE?
Yes, so that's a really good question, and I'm thinking about that as well. So one direction in which I could take the study is collect more data here, so maybe involve other departments. But I was thinking of collecting data from Oxford, for example, to compare. So another prestigious university, but with a slightly different image, yeah, or reputation. Because I know, so it's true that returns on investment are highest. So LSE graduates earn the highest when they go into the labor market. So yeah, it's true that I could see what holds if I extend it to a different university.
That's my turn.
Yes.
That's my turn.
Yes.
Super interesting. Thank you so much. Just I'm curious about what percentage of the sample is from a working class, and if you have information about if they are on scholarship.
Yes. So sorry, I have the slide. Maybe perfect. Thank you so much. Here, 13% in my sample say that they're from a working class background. Yes.
And are they on scholarship or you don't have that?
I don't have this information about them. No. So this is how they identify, and it's based on. So this question asks about parents when they were about age 14. So yeah. I collected data also on how they perceive themselves now, so, but it's very similar. In just a few cases, it was different, so I decided to show the background. I don't know if they're on a scholarship. Some of them might be, yeah.
Sorry, and just a follow-up question. And are there cross-department differences in the data, in the results we show?
So there was not statistically significant differences when it comes to priorities. No. But yeah, my assumption is also that there would be some difference on what they focus on at university. Clearly from the interviews, the ones who go to pursue economics or politics and economics, or even social policy and economics, where there is this very clearly defined path towards financial careers, seem to have a more linear trajectory of spring week internship. Now I know everything. So spring week internship, converting that into a graduate job. Yeah.
Thank you for this. It was really interesting. I'm interested to know if there is difference in ethnicities and how they perceive their degree. As a factor of just being white majority and.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my sample, the highest percentage of students are Asian or Asian British, and 31% are white, 7% are Black British Caribbean, and 9% are mixed or multiple ethnic groups. And then there are a few other very ethnicities that are very they're not very represented. So I haven't checked whether there are differences based on ethnicity, but that's a very promising avenue.
Thank you so much, Fiona. It was super interesting. My question will be like, now that you have those results, what will be, for example, us that we're mentoring students, what would you say that will be like your main recommendations for this?
I have to say I'm quite optimistic after seeing the results. Maybe I'm more cynical to begin with, but the fact that they most of them prioritize academic performance and the fact that their beliefs about what required of them to get a good graduate job doesn't seem to impact the way they spend their time here that much. It's actually, for me, very positive. I think what we're observing with them really focusing on improving in so many directions and in so many ways. And yeah, I wonder if that leads to exhaustion. I wonder if, so a lot of them have mentioned pressure in the interviews, not wanting to be left behind. So building all these different forms of capital so as to not be left behind in either of these areas. I think that's important for us to consider. Yeah. I'm not really sure what we can make of it, but just maybe allowing them to, reminding them to go at their own pace. I don't think it's probably very useful that they built all these skills. Yes.
So this is really fascinating as someone who's new to the institution and this higher ed context. And my question's kind of in that light, which is you had about half and half in your sample home and international students, and you had at least one respondent who talked about differences between the London job market and going home to whatever their country was. Do you see differences in the way students, international students versus home students, think about the positional value of a degree or of higher ed in general, because they're being positioned in different ways in different sort of segmented global labor markets? So I was wondering if that appeared more in your data.
Yeah, I have data on that, but I haven't analyzed it for this presentation. A lot of international students want to stay here. So, and in the interviews, I've picked mostly young people who want to stay here because I wanted to be able to compare. So from that perspective, they have alternatives. They might go back. So in a way that's different from home students because they have more choice. So if this labor market doesn't work out, they think, oh, I can go back to, we don't know if that's true or not, but that's how they think. But I do think some of them at least try their hand to get the job here, and then they might consider going back. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. This is very interesting for me as well, as a newcomer here. And one of the questions I think regarding or related to Carter's point is, it would be very interesting to see, I don't know if you've explored this before, like the intersections between many of these factors you have, again, these groups, things like if talent or luck are different for internationals or for nationals, because we have many of these categories. So it would be interesting to see like how they cross. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, I'll look into that.
If I could like follow up on it, like perhaps, and regarding this point about the parents' wealth and education, what's your interpretation connecting these to like the way you see the students understand now what they're doing here at the university, particularly in terms of like the social mobility or like education as a mechanism for social mobility? Is it like something they just don't believe anymore in? Or is it just like education is something that will unlock the benefits of being part of a family network? Like, how do you connect these two things of your results?
Yes, so in my previous work on meritocracy, I thought that because they mention, oh, you know, I am privileged in some ways, that they acknowledge the advantages they had, that means that they don't really buy into this meritocratic narrative. But now I think that the meritocratic narrative is expanding. So it's not, I work hard and I'm talented and I don't use any of that. That was, I think, initially the idea, that it's either merit or structural advantages. I think now it's more about the combination between these. And especially if they seem to think that the starting point here is that everyone comes from relatively privileged backgrounds, then I think, it's more about how you use that rather than having or not having it.
Fiona, thank you so much. This is very interesting, particularly for me as an ex-student of the school, how things have changed. I'm just curious to know whether there is research to understand whether this is a change from the previous cohorts, reflecting on the changing economic environments in different places, including Britain, and the political change, given also Brexit, etc. So is this just different from, let's say, 5 years ago, what students were thinking? That might be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I will try to find something similar from previous cohorts. I haven't really found this literature on that from the past, but yeah, that would be a good idea to check whether maybe this has always been the case in universities. But I do ask them, so whether they think that the labor market in their field is more competitive than 5 years ago, or less competitive, or the same. And most of them seem to think that it's more competitive. So I think they have this acknowledgement that for them the competition is even higher. And even when they compare to their parents, when they speak in interviews, they seem to think their parents had a much easier time. So yeah, this is from my interviewee's perspective, not from research, but yeah.
I think we're out of time. Fiona, thank you so much.